scripture we're about to read takes place very, very early. This is before even Judaism was Judaism. This is in the life of, it's before Abraham was Abraham. He was called Abram. Abram. Very early. And he's 75 years old when this occurs. He lives to be 175 years old. And this is about his call and how he listens to God and how God speaks. So hear the word of God from Genesis, the 12th chapter, beginning with the first verse. Now the Lord God said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." That's the promised land, Canaan. "I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you may be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the ones who curse you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed for Haran. This is the word of God for the people of God. And thanks be to God. When God speaks, how does God speak? When God called Abram to later become Abraham, the father of the nation, how does God speak? The final polishing on this little message was Friday morning. It occurred to me that I needed to tell a story that I've not told before. I was actually saving this story for my dad's funeral, but I don't know if I'll do it or not. But it's a story that needs to be shared because I'm asked all the time about my calling to the ministry. And I've realized in my life it's very difficult, and I hope this doesn't sound super narcissistic this morning because the story's about me. I hope, and I've never been able to really articulate the way I really need to and tell people about my call into the ministry, because it would take more than a sermon, more than a year, just would take a long time to tell the story. But I'd like to tell you about an incident that happened. When I was 50 years old, how things kind of fell in line a little better for me in understanding. That's interesting, isn't it? I started in the ministry when I was 19. And it was when I was 50, I moved to Boonville, First Methodist Church as the pastor. And I stayed there 7 years, had a great ministry, and enjoyed it. But that was not my first time to live in Prentiss County. When I was 14 years old, my dad was assigned to new site charge. When I was 14 years old, he had 4 churches on the new site charge. And so we lived there out in that community, served those churches. Daddy served about 16 years in the Baptist church as a minister, and then about 18 to 19 years in the Methodist church as a minister before he retired. And when I moved there, I was renewed. A lot of acquaintances, a lot of people approached me and said, "Oh yeah, your dad married us," or "Your dad baptized me," or "Your dad did these things." And I started reflecting and thinking about some of the things that happened back during that time. Well, this is when I was 50 years old. And here's something important to know about the story. My dad always viewed a call to the ministry as a call to preach. To preach. He loved to preach. Okay? He was a preacher. Loved to preach. I personally came along later and I viewed the call as a call to ministry. Now the verb is different. Preaching or pastoring. And I viewed my call as one to pastor, which is a little different. They are different. both of them well, but some don't. Some are better preachers than they are pastors. Some are better pastors than they are preachers. I viewed my call as calling to the ministry as a pastor. Daddy viewed his as a call to preach. That's beside the point. I never did want to do that. I never felt that was my call like he did. I didn't want to major in preaching as much as I did pastoring because that's where my heart was. Well, moved to Boonville. These people started approaching me, telling me about their life, and I started reflecting and remembering events that happened in my life. Two events happened when I was 14 there at Newsite that came back to memory, came back to mind. The principal people involved, it flooded my mind when I was 50 years old. One was this. When we moved there in June, Daddy was assigned there. In July, there was a death there on the church charge. Mr. Martin died. He was a young man. He had 8 children, I believe. 8 children. And he was a member of the church. And he was in his pasture raking hay. Came up a summer shower. He gets off of his tractor, stands under a tree. Lightning strikes him, kills him. Mr. Martin. A very tragic thing happened. Daddy was there for a month. He was a pastor. And I remember him trying to minister to this family. I was watching this as a 14-year-old. And he was doing his best. He was ministering to them. And I remember riding with him over to their house. And I was sitting in the car. And he meets this family. And they're all stair-step, these children. He meets them in the yard. The youngest one was in the mother's arms, the bottle. The next one is a little curly-headed child with a bottle in his or her mouth, walking around. The oldest one was a freshman in college at Northeast. Stair-step, all of these children. But there they were, and Daddy goes to them to minister to them. And I was watching this, a 14-year-old child watching this, and I saw him gather this family around him there in the front yard. Other people in the neighborhood were watching, were there. But he gathered them around him, and we went to pray for them. And it was an amazing sight to behold and to see. Here's this minister ministering to a family in the most crisis, difficult time you can imagine. The little toddler, I remember her just hanging on to his pants leg with a bottle in her mouth. You know, just looking up at the minister. But there the minister is, Methodist minister, with his arms around this family, offering comfort as best as he could in a situation like that. And I remember thinking, and all this flooded back later in the year, but I remember thinking, God, if I could do something like that in my life, wouldn't that be wonderful? I remember thinking that, 14 years old. Now, later that year, something similar happened. Another event. I know it was odd that both of them happened that same year, but it did. There was another couple in the church, a young couple. Their infant died. Great tragedy. Daddy was called on to minister to them, to do their funeral, to do that funeral. And I remember this. I was watching this with my eyes also. It was at the funeral home there in Boonville, in the parking lot. I can tell you how the mother was dressed. She had a black dress on. Daddy had a gray suit on. And if you've never seen an infant casket, they're made of styrofoam. They're not very attractive. But this child was in a casket on the back seat of the funeral director's car. And the funeral director was holding the casket. And Daddy got this couple, and he had his arms around them. He was praying for them. I remember seeing this. Here we have a couple that are going through the most visceral, wrenching experience you could ever imagine, right? I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. But here we have a minister, it happened to be a Methodist minister, with his arms around this couple, praying for healing, praying for comfort, praying that God minister to them. Not only the way that God can, and comfort and heal them. Now, why am I telling these stories? And why did it have such an effect on me when I moved back to Prentiss County at 50 years old? A lot of things kind of fell in line that had previously kind of been unanswered. I didn't know why I liked pastoring so much more than preaching, why preaching was a part of it, and all of these things, this mixture of things in my mind. How God speaks to us and how God calls us and the events that happen. Am I saying those events happen for me to go into the ministry? No. Don't misunderstand that. I'm not saying that. I am saying, though, how God utilizes all of the events of life in a very special way. How God does this. How a tornado can come through Nashville, Tennessee, and people die and perish in the process. And how can anything good come out of that? But it does. It does. How is only in the mind of God. 1,800 years before Jesus was born, Abram was 75 years old, and he lived in a place called Ur of the Chaldees. Today it's modern Iraq. And God spoke to him. How did God speak to Abram? That's the question, isn't it? How did God speak? Was it a series of events in life? Was it an audible voice? Would we be so narrow-minded as to say God only speaks in perfect English? I wonder how God does speak. What kind of voice does he speak with? Is it through dreams? Read the Christmas narratives. Read all the stories of Mary and Joseph and how God spoke to them through dreams. Does God speak through a quiet, still voice like he did with Isaiah in the wilderness, in the cave of the mountain, a cave? Or does he speak with a loud, booming voice like we might imagine? All we do know is that Abram left his home and followed God's word. How does God speak to people? I had Jenny, I told her Monday morning I wanted to sing "Oh, How Joyful, Joyful We Adore Thee" as an opening hymn. And the reason I wanted to do that is because when Ludwig van wrote the music in about early 1800s, it was called the Ode to Joy. And when it was first performed, Beethoven couldn't even hear it. He was deaf. But the women that heard it swooned. The men that heard it trembled. People were moved to tears as they hear the Ode to Joy for the first time. The idea was that it was the very voice of God speaking to them. Beethoven's music to that song that we opened with, "Joyful, joyful, we adore thee." Does God speak through music? What do you think how God speaks? Through dreams sometimes in the Bible, or through signs? I have no doubt in my mind that things happen. That's a very popular term today, isn't it? Things happen. Yes, very popular term. They happen. But I'm convinced that things happen. And how they happen is quite another thing altogether. Whether it's my life or your life, or the lives of millions of others that we're surrounded by. Is it coincidence? Or is it a direct answer to prayers? People, be careful with interpreting God's voice. People have done some mighty foolish and hideous things, interpreting things as God's will or interpreting events? Does everything that happens, every voice that speaks to you, the voice of God? Abram, the man we're talking about, he did a really strange thing later in his life with his son Isaac. You know the story. If you've gone to Sunday school, you know about Abraham and Isaac. Isaac is his son, and on an occasion in their lives, Abraham is told by God to take your son Isaac and offer him as a sacrifice on the land of Moriah. So he goes to Mount Moriah, Abraham does, with Isaac. This is later in Jewish cultures taught us that this is where Jerusalem was built, on the Mount of Moriah. And take Isaac and offer him as a sacrifice there on Mount Moriah. Now you think about that with me for a moment. Just think about that incident. Think about how ungodly that sounds. How uncivilized and how barbaric it is for a person to practice infanticide. Think about it. Think about it. And what God told Abraham to do. Now there's so much more to the story than what we just see and read and hear. And I know God's will was behind it. We understand that. But also understand this. At this time of antiquity, in this time in history, Mount Moriah was surrounded by valleys where pagan Canaanites practiced infanticide regularly. They offered their children as sacrifices regularly. They killed infants regularly. The country was covered. That was very popular. As a matter of fact, if you look at history, it's been done right up till recent centuries. People offering children as sacrifice, infanticide. And what makes this a very pivotal moment, or that incident a very pivotal moment in Jewish history and in all civilized history, is when God stops Abraham's hand. No, God stops his hand as he's about ready to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. God says, no, don't do that. Only the pagans and the immoral people would do that. We're going to put a stop to that for all time. And that marks a very pivotal moment in the history of civilization when God directs Abraham not to practice infanticide. Don't do that. Don't offer your child as a sacrifice. That's not what God directs you to do. And from then on, nowhere is it acceptable at all. That's why even today, why I'm so opposed to abortion. For moral reasons, yes. But it's kind of uncivilized, isn't it? To take an innocent life. God put an end to that. He put an end to that. So I'm saying there's so much more to the story than what we just hear or see in black and white. How does God choose to speak? And here's another point. This is a good point. Think about this one. Do we limit ourselves because we insist too strictly on rational explanations for everything that happens? When God speaks and when things happen, do we limit? I like that point so much I want to repeat it. Do we limit ourselves because we insist too strictly on rational explanations for everything that happens? People ask me questions all the time, and you know what kind of answers they love? Yes or no, true or false. They don't want complex answers. Just want a simple answer, yes or no. But you know what? Some things call for more than just a yes or a no. Some things call for more than just simple explanation, because any old preacher can answer any old question you want to ask any old time of the day with the Bible. They can answer them. But is it the correct answer? Don't believe just anything and everything that things happen. You know, we've experienced a winter where it's been so wet you can't walk in the back parsonage yard without sinking up to your ankle in mud. I mean, it's been so wet in the backyard. But in a few months, you know what's going to happen? That's going to be so dry. we're going to be saying, gee, it's never been so dry. We can't imagine a drought like we're experiencing, right? Now, the weather, the climate, are these signs from God? Who knows how God may choose to speak? Even the weather, even a storm in Nashville. We could limit ourselves by a lack of faith, or we could limit ourselves by requiring rational explanations for everything that happens. There may not be a rational explanation for everything that happens. Only God knows. So the question is this. It would be for Abram and it would be for you and for me. The question is, are we listening when God does speak? That's the question, isn't it? Because it's quite evident that God speaks in a myriad of ways. If there's 150 people here this morning, I know God speaks in 150 different ways. Are we listening when God does speak? Are we ready to hear Him? I love a little story about the guy that had a parrot. He bought this parrot at the store, and he wanted to talk to the parrot, a companion, a friend. The parrot never would talk with him. He kept him for several weeks, several months, and the parrot never talked. So he finally decided, I'm carrying you back to the pet store. So he walks across the street in front of the pet store, and a car hits him. And right before the car hits the man, the parrot says, "Watch out, there's a car coming." And he gets up, and feathers are flying, and the cage is bent, and the man can barely walk, and he says, You finally decided to talk. And the parrot said, "Yes, and when I do, you don't listen." And I told you to watch out. Could that be a problem with maybe God's children? Listening is not what we do best. We're much better at talking than we are at listening. You ever run across that? People can't hear you because they're so busy thinking about what they're wanting to say. There's a joke at the assisted living home about the people telling the stories over and over and over. You know how we do when we get older, we tell our stories. And we tell the story over, and we tell the story over, and we tell it over again, and we forget that we told it, so we tell it again. And finally, this lady in the nursing home said, "I know how I'll deal with this. I'll just number all these stories. Number 1 will be John's story about World War I, and number 2 will be Jane's story about her first husband." And they just numbered all of these stories down. And then when they gathered around the table to play cards or whatever they did, they'd look at the list and someone would just holler, "Number 12. Everybody looked at 12. "Oh yeah, we don't have to tell the story. We just know what that is." We're so familiar with the story and used to it. We're not very good at listening. We don't do that very well. I remember my mother saying so often, we talk so much that we can't hear ourselves think. Take time as you pray. I believe you pray, but take time to listen as well as talk. So often we think prayer is just verbal communicating with God, but it could involve listening as well. Take time to pray, and pray for the things that are important to you. Pray for your family. Pray for your work. "Oh, I'm not working anymore, I'm retired." Well, pray for your retirement. Pray for your church. If there ever was a time the church needs prayer, we need prayer. Pray for your problems. Is the problem one of God speaking, or is it one of us listening? Someone said God equipped us with eyelashes and we can close our eyes to the problem, but He did not equip us with ear lashes. But I disagree with that. I think we all practice selective hearing. We hear usually about what we want to hear. Do not limit ourselves by a lack of faith, or do we limit ourselves by a lack of faith or a failure to listen? Now, as we're bringing this to a conclusion, I'll ask you this. Are we willing to act? Are we willing to act as Abram did when God does speak? And how God speaks, again, a 14-year-old boy at New Site, Are we willing to act when God does speak? And that's the real problem. It's not that we don't know God's will. Have you ever run across people that just wring their hands, oh, if I could just know God's will? Well, I did that. I did that as a young 19-year-old contemplating ministry. I did that. I know how it feels. What do you want me to do, God, with my life? Okay. It's not that we don't know God's will. It's that we're unwilling to act on God's part. There are things we already know is God's will for us. I'm telling you, I think there's 99.9999% of things in life that you already know is God's will for you and your family. You know that. Why don't we embrace those things that we already know is God's will? Love those people that we need to love. Be close to those people we need to be close to. Do the things that we already know that's God's will. Maybe He'll open other things up to us in the future. There are things that we already know He wants to be doing. Bill McCarthy, a coach, he was a coach for so many years. He finally gave up his coaching career and went into the ministry. Some of you may remember him, founder of Promise Keepers. There was an article in Sports Illustrated that dealt with his call to the ministry. It wasn't a real flattering article. When he gives up his very lucrative career as a coach, an article was written about him saying that he was probably out of his mind. In Sports Illustrated, they used words like this for Bill. He was radical. He was out of his head. He was consumed. He was a religious zealot. The point they were making in that Sports Illustrated article is that a little bit of God is acceptable. Right? Just a little bit. It's acceptable. It's all right. But a determination to seek God's will at all costs, do what God's called you to do at all costs, well, that's an extremist. Well, evidently, Abram, in this text, before he becomes Abraham, evidently he was an extremist. For he heard God's voice there in that place at that time. You know, God had talked to his dad before he talked to Abram. His dad's name was Terah. And God called Terah, but Terah never fulfilled what God wanted him to do. So God calls Abram, and he listens. He even set out to do what God called him to do. And he does this by faith. All through the New Testament writers look back on Abraham and they always say the same thing. By faith, Abraham did this, he did that. By faith. By faith, he stepped out and he did. Well, how about you? As we're coming to a conclusion now for this wordy little message. We do not know God's perfect will. There is no way on earth we can know God's perfect will unless you want to get in the mind of God. And I don't think you're there. We do not know God's perfect will. But are we willing to act on what we do know of God's will? What we do know that God wants us to do. What we do know that God wants us to be. I assure you, He wants you to be the best you can be. Are we acting on that? Are we doing that? What we already know is God's will for our lives. Abram did. There are other individuals that heard the voice of God. We want to be in that number, don't we? We certainly do. And as we experience the second Sunday of this wonderful season of Lent, I hope we listen. The theme is listen. Listen to God's voice, because God speaks through everything. God speaks through these children at the steps. God speaks through the elements. God speaks through music. God speaks even through preachers. Yes. God speaks through a myriad of ways. Word. be up to you to listen and hear. May God give us the ability and wisdom to do so. Let's have our closing